Hey everyone, thanks for joining us for another conversation in the Scars and Wisdom series. So, this is really a conversation space where we honor the truth of what we've been through and the wisdom that now lives in us because of it. And today I'm so happy to have Amy Shield with us today. So, Amy, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and let everybody know what you're up to in the world?
Thank you so much, Karen. And thank you also for allowing me to be a part of this conversation and to share this space with me. It's such a pleasure to be here with you discussing this really important topic. Like you said, my name is Amy Shield, and I am a life coach. I help women feel as confident on the inside as they look on the outside. And I do my thing in the Kansas City, Missouri area.
Amazing. I love that feeling aligned on the inside and the outside and making sure that matches is such important work. Absolutely. We're going to jump into the questions. So it's called Scars and Wisdom. So we're really starting with the scars and then helping people see the journey that you've taken through to get to some of that wisdom. So can you start by just telling us about some of those scars?
Absolutely. So, from the time I was a very small child, my biggest fear was always losing my mom. She was And here we go. We're like 2 minutes in, and I already hear the wiggles in my voice, but my mom was an incredible person, and she was an awesome role model. She had so much integrity, and no matter the situation, she knew exactly what to do, and as you can probably imagine, especially as a child, losing that kind of a North Star, that kind of a lighthouse in your life, or even the idea of it, the prospect it, or realizing that it's coming one day, that was a huge fear for me. And it was always something that loomed in the back of my mind. And one day, Karen, that fear came knocking at my door. And that's really where my scar story begins. I don't know how far you want me to go into what happened or what the process was like. I'll let you lead the conversation.
Yeah, whatever you feel comfortable sharing, I think we would, excuse me, love to engage with that with you. I think it's interesting. I did want to point out what you talked about, and as a young child, that you already were leaning into that anticipatory grief. And did you know it at the time? Did you know at that young age that's what it was? Or did it just feel like worry and fear to you?
So it really just felt like worry and fear. And I think at some point I had a classmate who lost a parent and I thought to myself, "Oh, if every person dies, that's going to happen to me one day." And so then from that moment on, I just lived with this fear in the back of your mind. People say, "What are you afraid of? Are you afraid of heights?" I'm like, "I'm afraid of my losing my mom," which I think a lot of people are, but for me, that was really the most prevalent fear, and there probably was some anticipatory grief in there. As an adult, I wouldn't even let myself think about it because anytime I did, I would just break out sobbing and, "Oh my gosh, when my mom is gone, what am I gonna do? How will I move through the world without having her love and her knowledge and her guidance to fall back on?"
Yeah. Yeah. Really insightful as a young child. So, yeah, why don't you share as much as you want to?
Yeah, of course, and this was gosh, so she passed away in 2022. My husband and I had lunch with my mom on New Year's Eve at her favorite restaurant. So December 31st and January 2nd, I got a call from my dad saying, "I took your mom to the ER and she's in the ICU." And so you hear those words, it's what? It's like in the cartoons when they like shake their head because they can't believe what's happening. And that's what happened for me. And so my mom was in the ICU during COVID. She didn't have COVID, and that's not what she passed away from, but she was in the ICU for almost 2 months in another part of the metro area here where I live. And I was working full time at the time and also building my business in the evenings and then driving 45 minutes one way to the hospital to visit her when I was able to almost every day and working around the COVID restrictions and all of that kind of stuff. And it was really divine timing that I was certified as a coach because I had finished my coaching certification about 6 months before that, and then this popped up and I was thrust into living my greatest fear for almost 2 months, and then, of course, the grand finale. was my mom passing away at the end of February of 2022. And it was tough. It was tough to face, of course, your biggest fear. And then also, somebody had to be a leader in the family. And I'm the youngest, and I have three older brothers, and I'm the only girl. So you can probably imagine what life was like for me as a child. But somebody needed to fill that leadership role, and it became me very quickly. And not only was I in a situation where I was facing my biggest fear, working my full time job that I still had at the time when I could, and then also leading my family and family friends and making medical decisions and being there for my mom, who was sedated in the ICU. So that was a lot. It was a lot to be experiencing. And I would say that it changed me in some really interesting ways.
I wanted to just pause and say how sorry I am for the loss of your mom, and she sounded like she was such an amazing, just strong role model for you in your life, and I understand the pain of the unexpected, and I also resonate with the leadership. I'm just there's a lot of things that I'm connecting with you on, and we chatted just briefly before we hit record, and like you said, there's a lot of commonalities that we experience. The details look different, right? But so much of us journey through the same types of things. And I think that's why these conversations are so important because we really want people to understand that what you're feeling is normal. There's no wrong way to do this. You're not alone. That's really important.
Oh, yeah.
I wanna just touch on quickly, and then I wanna have a follow-up question to what you just said about change. Taking on that leadership role and stepping into that. I know for me my mom had Alzheimer's, and my sister passed away in 2018, and so it was just me. It was just the 2 of us, and so when her health started to decline, I had to really step up into that role, and I was completely unprepared for that. I was working full time. I have my own kids, also doing a business on the side. And I felt so stretched in every single way in my life. I felt like I was failing at everything. Did you step into that with more grace than I did? Or how did that go for you?
Roughly the same, honestly. It's really interesting because I can be a really timid person in certain situations and a lot more so earlier in my life. Coaching changed that for me, and this experience changed that for me to some extent as well. And I filled the vacuum because somebody had to do it, and I was the best prepared family member to take on that role. Yes, I did things imperfectly. Absolutely, there were missteps, and there were things that looking back, maybe I would choose differently today in terms of some of what played out during that period. And I think that no leader no human leader is ever going to be perfect, especially during periods of crisis and chronic stress like we endure when we have family members like your mom who had Alzheimer's, which, is something that's progressive over a long period of time, or my mom who was in the ICU for 2 months. That's a lot of stress. And I think that anybody who agrees to step into that leadership role or just chooses to do it needs to be commended because what you're really doing is you're putting yourself at the front of the pack in the face of uncertainty. And it takes gumption to do that, however imperfectly.
Wow. I just got chills when you said that. And that's right. And I do hope everybody hears that. We're so hard on ourselves that we're our own worst critics. We know this. But for everybody who has cared for somebody that, their health was failing and balance that with 100 other things that you were doing in life. I do hope that you do take a moment just to, like you said, commend yourself for stepping into that and doing your very best across for all areas of your life. And I just don't think we say that enough. So I wanted to make sure that I reinforce that as well.
I appreciate that. Yeah, and I we touched really briefly on perfectionism before you hit record, and for I also share some of those perfectionistic tendencies. And going through that kind of a high stress, high stakes process, especially as a perfectionist, it can be an emotional landmine because you leave the hospital or the meeting with the physician or the care team at the end of the day thinking, I should have advocated for this. I should have said that. I should have asked this question. And could I have? Yes. But that's not the point. The point is that I was there and I did the best I could in the moment, and I can adjust and pivot however I need to for the next meeting or the next incident or the next moment that grief touches my life in this way.
Yeah. And you're so spot on. When you're in that situation, your mind is so overstressed. Like you said, I felt the same way. I would leave and I would like, I had 100 questions. Like, why didn't I ask like all of these questions? And a lot of that played into the guilt and the shame that came after my mom passed away specifically because I was faced with this decision. I was the only person to make it. And it was, do I put her on hospice or do we keep trying to figure out what's going on? And I can remember just crying and I just wanted somebody to tell me what to do. I don't want to have to make this decision on my own. This is too much for me. I'm not prepared. Who am I to make a decision this instrumental for somebody else? And then it was like you're the only one. Like you're her daughter and you just have to do the best that you can and you have to make the best decision with the best information that you have. And once I, like, was able to, like, process some of that guilt and shame, I realized, like, my mom was going to pass away. No decision I made was going to change that, and she did it in a way that made her very comfortable and in the place that she was familiar with. So, there's so much guilt and shame that comes after loss, and again, another plug to remind people that we do our best, and that's good enough.
Absolutely. And you touched on this scenario where you're deciding hospice or continuing to treat, and that is a tough decision. And any decision, especially that involves somebody else's life and comfort and well-being, where you don't like either outcome, that is a tough position to be in. And one of the things that was important for me in that scenario was comforting myself there instead of verbally beating myself up no matter what decision I made. Because no matter what you do, it's gonna hurt. Somebody's not gonna like the decision, whatever the case might be. And like you said, just doing the best you can in the moment is doing a great job in that moment for the person you are and the resources you have.
Yeah, absolutely. So you touched on change, and I would love for you to talk about that because, anybody who's been through loss, I think the recurring feeling is that we're different, right? Everything changes in so many ways. So how did that manifest for you?
That's a great question. One of the big changes that and I don't know if this was true for you, but like I mentioned earlier, I'm really glad that I got my coaching certification incidentally before my mom got sick because I was as a perfectionistic type person for so much of my life, I was so used to shoving my emotions down and ignoring them. And one of the most important changes that happened for me through this was the ability to just let myself experience whatever emotions were coming up and not making it wrong and not feeling like I had to hide it, but just allowing my emotions to be there. And when I started doing that, it removed an extra layer of suffering from my experience that would have been on top of everything else if I were still operating in that kind of perfectionistic, emotional numbness kind of a mindset. So that is one really big change that happened for me. I think another one was that I really learned to let people be who they are and to let circumstances be what they are. Because like you talked about, there is nothing that I could have done to save my mom's life, and so that circumstance being what it was, I told myself, "Okay, what I have to focus on here is what I can control." And what I can control is how I show up and how I make decisions and how I support her and everybody else that's involved, from my family to her friends to even the medical staff that were attending to her and providing her care. And so letting circumstances be what they were and letting people be who they are was important for me, because I could have been really upset in the aftermath of my mom's passing that I stepped up in a really big way, and not everybody was able to do that. And it was really illuminating to me that to realize that everybody has a different level of resource and a different level of capacity, and everybody's doing the best they can. My best looks different from somebody else's, and that's okay.
So much there that you just shared that's really beneficial to ponder and to think about. And the emotional piece, I think so many people can relate to. I don't remember just having conversations growing up about anything like the hard things are going to happen. And when they happen, this is how you can work through that. And it's okay to express and to share and to be vulnerable. Like there was no emotional framework provided. So I know for me, I just learned to push everything down and keep going. I don't think anyone ever said those words like, this is what you have to do, but it was like the implied way, right? Like you didn't see anybody role modeling it any other way. As a young child, you're just like, okay, that's just how it happens, right? You just keep going. You keep
Yeah,
going.
absolutely. And that's how a lot of us cope with our emotions, is like you said, just shoving them down. And as you and I have both probably experienced, that's one solution.
Yeah, it
And
it
and
is. Yep. And it
yeah.
has definite consequences. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's one thing I'm hoping to help advocate for change in the grief and loss space is this ability for people to find their voice and to share what they're really feeling, not the surface level. And I'm going to show you, and I don't know if you use this. Do you ever use the emotions wheel?
Yes, I have a pillow of it right here off camera.
I love that. This is like my one of my go-to resources. When I discovered it, I was shocked that I'm like, there's all of these feelings and emotions. I thought there was only a few because we stay so surface level with things. But when you're able to really dig into and drill down to what sits underneath those surface level emotions, then you're able to actually say, oh, it's not anger I'm feeling. I'm embarrassed or I'm scared or whatever that deeper emotion is. That is the richness, the nuance that gives you the ability to then take some actions that are actually going to be helpful versus just thinking, I'm mad.
Yeah, and that's a great insight, and I think that getting granular on your emotions and understanding what you're actually feeling and what your body is experiencing in addition to what's happening in your mind is incredibly valuable, because like you said, then you can respond from a more informed stance.
Yeah, absolutely. And then looping back to your realization and the learning of letting people be who they are. And I remember specifically having that choice, right? Where some things were happening. So when my dad passed away, he passed away in September. And so then
Mhm.
that was the last person in my origin family. Very hard for me. My dad and I were really close. And also, it was very hard because I knew that's the last person in my family besides me. And I just felt untethered. That's the feeling. Like I just felt completely untethered in this world. And my dad's wife, who is a beautiful, wonderful, amazing person, the way that she responded to grief. is different than I would have chosen to respond to grief. She would send me things from his phone, and so I would be walking by and I would see my phone and it would say dad, and I was like,
Mm.
every part of the pain and the triggers and the emotions came flooding back, like, instantly, and it just completely took me off guard, and so I'm like, "Okay, I can be upset with her for this," but I'm like, "Okay, I'm remembering, like you said, everyone processes this differently," and she was just wanting to share some beautiful pictures that she had found in his phone that she thought would bring a smile to my face. And so that could have gone very differently, right? If I would have been like, "What are you doing? Why would you do this to me?" Versus stepping back. And also I've done a lot of the emotional work to not be reactive and to be more responsive. So I give myself time out. When I'm triggered, I now give myself a timeout because I'm like, I can either react like I always have, or I can be more intentional and respond from a conscious space. And it always turns out better when I respond versus react. But I think that's just really insightful that you shared. People are going to show up differently. They're going to handle things differently than you. Some of it's not going to feel great, but it's just a reminder that grief hits people so differently. And usually people don't have ill intent when it comes to being in the throes of grief and loss. They're just in it and they're doing the best they can.
Yeah, and I so sorry to hear, by the way, about your dad's passing in September, and what a beautiful illustration of how the same action can be it can hit 2 people completely differently, and just the importance of the mindfulness around that and honoring somebody else's way of grieving, but then also keeping yourself safe and taking care of yourself. Like you said, giving yourself those timeouts, giving yourself the mental and emotional space to just pause and grieve as you need to. That is so important. And I think that sets a really great example for your audience and your clients.
Yeah. And I think the other part of that is and you can still create a boundary, right? But you can do
Yeah.
it in a loving way because that was really important for me because I did need her to know I can't see that on my phone anymore. Yeah, I understand it. I understand why you wanted to share it with me, but I can't be taken off guard like that and just see his name pop up on my phone. It was too much for me. And so I created that boundary and I did it in a very loving way. And she said, "Oh, she felt really bad." I'm like, "I don't want you to feel bad. I just want you to know that for me, that's too hard." And so you can do both, right? We don't have to pick one or the other. And I think that's just, again, how we've been conditioned. We have to choose wrong. Everything's polarized. But when you can put the word and in between and realize that we don't have to always choose one or the other, then that's where I feel like so much of the emotional charge just goes away because it's like we're taking bits and pieces from both sides and we're bringing it into some middle ground. It just feels very balanced to me.
Yeah. And the interesting thing about boundaries is if you let them, they can help you love other people better on both sides. So I commend you for setting that boundary. And because sometimes it's less uncomfortable in the moment to just allow those kinds of things to continue, and because we don't wanna hurt the other person's feelings and all of that kind of stuff, but it's awesome that you stood up and said, "Hey, I'm gonna need some adjustments to happen here so I can continue on in a way that's healthy for me."
Yeah. And like you said, the boundary is really I think there's a misconception the boundary is meant to keep everything out, but it's actually to let people in and to love them, like you said, love them and to keep them in your life, right? Because otherwise, without the boundary, if those things keep happening that are really hurting you, then so often what happens is then the relationship is just severed and it's just done because we didn't step up and say, "Hey, I understand and this is what I need." And so I always look at it as a loving way to keep people in your life, not to keep them out. That's how
Yeah, and that's a beautiful way
yeah,
to explain it.
yeah. So how did you go about you were the strong one, you took that leadership role. when did the grief really come fully into your life, and how did you start to process that?
That's a really interesting question because my mom was in the ICU, like I said, for almost 2 months, and so she was sedated, and this is another interesting for me, a component of my faith, but it's just another interesting, droplet that God put into my life before my mom passed away. About a year before she passed away, as I was getting my wrapping up my coaching certification, I set an intention that I was going to either talk to my mom or text her every single day. And so I actually did that for the last year of her life, which was really enriching. And so when she went into the hospital, that was no longer a thing. And my grief process really started in terms of adjusting to the change of not being able to talk to her. That really started when she went into the hospital. And so by the time she passed away, I was already used to not being able to, "Oh, hey, how's mom doing?" Or, "Oh, man, I need some advice on this. Let me just give her a quick call and see," because I had already been out of that habit for 2 months. And even after my mom passed away, we had to plan a funeral. We ha and that, again, I is something that I took the lead on along with my aunt, who is amazing. She helped with that as well. And my dad and my brothers helped select some things for the funeral too, but even after she passed, I still had to be on, if you will, because there was a visitation and a funeral and burial and all of this, and family members in town who needed different things from us and all that kind of stuff. So, in terms of really being able to grieve, it was more like I grieved in bits and pieces. Okay, I have an hour right now. I'm just going to sit and be really sad. And then it's okay. Let my neurological system calm down, scoop up, and go do the next thing that I need to be there for. And so it was this interesting mix between incredible pain and showing up as a leader in ways that I didn't really know I was capable of. And so that was a really interesting process. And even to this day, it's different. It's still hard.
It doesn't ever it doesn't ever go away. And I think that's one of the big misconceptions with grief is that there is an endpoint. And the models that I know I had access to, the only model that I knew of, groundbreaking for its time, but it was actually the 5 stages of grief. It was actually designed for people who had just gotten a diagnosis of a terminal illness. And it was more of a staged approach because there wasn't an ending to that, right? With grief, doesn't end. And so I think so many of us had this expectation that we just move through these things, and then once we're through them, then everything's gonna feel better again, and it doesn't. And I think that's why so many people feel like we're doing it wrong.
Yeah, you hit that nail on the head 100%. And I think one of the interesting things about grief for me has been that if you never stop loving someone after they're gone or whatever the case is, for me, I found that also means that I never stop grieving them.
Yeah. And that is it, right? It's because we continue to hold the love and attachment, which we want, right? Because we never want it. We I always think of it as I've made them, I've made my mom, I've made my dad, I've made my sister, my the part of who I am now. They're like in the fabric of my DNA. And so I'm carrying them with me now as I go forward. But like you said, because of that, be- I know the other side of that is that I'm always going to have moments where the grief is going to take me out totally.
Oh, yeah.
And everyone knows, right? It's just those random days where you're just plugging along and all of a sudden it comes and it just flattens you. And I'm like, okay, I just know now. I'm like, this is a grief day, and I just allow them for myself. And I'm really glad that I give myself permission to just let that be whatever it is, because that's when we don't and we push it down and we avoid it and we keep it locked away, it doesn't go away. And
Right.
there's so many implications. And I really think so many of the things that we're experiencing with disease and our mental health, if we went back and tied it back, we would find that at the heart of these things is loss that it was never attended to and grief that was never processed. So, what you talked about was, I think what I really work with clients around is this dual model of grief where you're intentionally sitting in the grief. And I know when I talk to people about that, that feels almost impossible. They're like, you want me to do what now? You want me to, like, intentionally think about this person and be sad and, like, all the things I'm trying to avoid doing? And I'm like, "I do." And I'm like, "And the reason I want you to do that is because we can't sit in the grief all the time and we can't avoid it all the time." It is, again, back to that kind of balance approach, is we need to, actually train our mind and our body that the person that we love isn't here anymore, and when we sit in that intentional time, we're saying to our mind and our body, I love this person so much and I hold them in my heart and they're not here anymore. And so I'm going to take this space and time right now to fully feel everything and to sit in the pain of the loss. And then when I'm done with this time, I'm going to engage with life again. And it's a retraining. That's what I found. It's really a retraining, because otherwise, what happens is our mind will continue to predict when we're gonna see that person again, and that's why you can go a year and pick up your phone to go text somebody that you logically know is not here anymore, but it's your brain trying to, it's this patterns. It's all these patterns and these data points of all the interactions you've ever had with this person, and I had no idea, I had no understanding of this until I got my grief educator certification, and then I also read a book that changed my life, which was called The Grieving Brain. And it's fascinating, and I think if people understood what our mind and body's actually going through, there would be a lot more compassion for grief, because it's a complete obliteration of everything you've known, and your brain has literally imploded is what's going on.
Yeah, and it's what you do, how you help your clients is so needed because like you said, there's no manual for this is how you do emotions. This is how you do grief. And so many people, it'd be like it's like trying to swim without ever having any instruction. And I think so many people suffer so much more because they're not getting help from someone like you to help them walk through their grief in a way that is healthy and honors their emotions and honors the changes that are coming in their life while also paying homage to the past and the person or situation or thing that they're grieving. So kudos to you for helping people do that. That is such an amazing calling. And I'm grateful for people like you in the world who are doing it.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, like you said, it's a calling. I never thought I would be doing this. When we go through the most impactful experiences of our life, oftentimes that's what the results is, right? We're called up to then share it with other people. And I remember seeing a quote after my sister passed away that stuck with me. It just was like ingrained in my brain. And it said, your greatest challenges will become somebody else, will become the survival guide that somebody else needs. And I'm like, yes, that's, if I can help just one person experience their grief in a way that, and I always tell people, I can't, like, there's no magic wand, right? I can't take away the pain because the pain's the love. I can help introduce some healthy processing that will help you move with your grief, and I can help reduce the suffering. But the pain I can't take away. And the pain is just every time we get attached to something or we love something, we know there's the risk of the loss, right? That's the gamble. And I know for me, I don't want to live in a world that doesn't have love and attachment. And so if I can help educate and bring grief out of the dark and into the light and help people normalize an experience that's going to happen to all of us over and over again, then I feel like that's the impact that I want to make in the world. But thank you for recognizing that.
Yeah, absolutely. Grief is a byproduct of love in many ways, and it's part of the human experience. And when we have and choose to seek out people who can guide us through those kinds of things, that can enrich the experience and also help us to take care of ourselves in ways that are a lot healthier and a lot more growth prompting than we would ever be able to do on our own.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've talked about the scars. So I would love for you to share what are some of those bits of wisdom, and you've already shared a lot, that really stand out for you that you were able to take from those difficult experiences.
So it's interesting because you mentioned that your story can become somebody else's survival guide. And there were so many times during my mom's illness and after she passed away that I had to make a decision or take an action. And I just thought, okay, what would my mom do here? Like, w- mom's brain, what choice would she make? And I realized that in this very roundabout, almost spiritual kind of way, she had been preparing me really to handle this my entire life. So that was, and of course I'm sitting there thinking, "Oh mom, you're such an awesome mom. You even helped me to prepare for facing my biggest fear, which is losing you." And I think something else, Karen, that I didn't even realize until I was reflecting for our conversation today. And this might sound a little weird in my teary, squeaky voice. I will try to explain it the best I can. But I think one of the probably the proudest moment of my life was when my mom passed. And again, I know you're like, Amy, what are you talking about here? But at that moment, I didn't have anything, nothing to offer except for myself and my love and my presence. And I remember hearing at some point, gosh, I might have even been in high school and I'm 41. So it was a good 20, 25 years ago now. But that when somebody passes away, they think that hearing is the last sense to go. And I'm sorry, I'm just taking a moment.
No apologies needed. And I'm now fully experiencing this with you. So
Yeah,
this is grief. This is grief.
100%. And I say it's my proudest moment because the last, say, 10 minutes that my mom was alive, I thought, this is the finale. And this is my chance to bring it and make her so proud of me one more time. And it's funny because I was actually more emotionally composed then than I am right now. I called family members and kept it together and was a leader for them and said, "Hey, if you'd like to say something." And so everybody who wanted to got to say something on speakerphone. And then as she was passing and vitals fading and all of this, I gave basically like a lifetime achievement award speech for her and told her how amazing she was and and what an awesome role model. Everything basically that I said at the beginning of the podcast here. And my voice was clear and strong, not nothing like you're hearing right now because I wanted her to know that I was okay and that I
Mhm.
would be okay. And like I said, reflecting on and preparing for our conversation today, I realized the proudest moment of my life wasn't when I got some degree or hit some income milestone or started my business or signed my first client. It was that I showed up and shepherded my mom out of this life with dignity and love and the support that she deserved. And I think that was you talk about wisdom. Facing your biggest fear in life, going through it and surviving it, man, in some ways it makes me unstoppable. But as you can see, I'm not the next Beyonce or whatever. But anytime anything has come up that I'm too afraid to do, I think, you know what? For 37 years, I was afraid of losing my mom. And I went through that and I survived it. Let's go.
Yeah.
Let's do this.
Yeah. And not because you avoided it, right? Because you didn't avoid it. You have fully sat in the trenches of it because
Yeah.
it's and I've been there in those circumstances where I did just avoid something and I'm like, let's go. But I did it without bringing the grief with me and bringing the loss with me. And then it all came crashing down on me at another time, which it does. But just what you expressed is so beautiful. And to in that moment, just like you said, all you could offer was presence and love. And I think that's what I really want people to remember is we've been performing our whole lives and that's how we've gotten validation that we're enough. And in the moments that really matter, none of that is important. It's are you showing up with love and compassion and like you said, the dignity of how you shepherd her shepherded her through to the next transition. And I find so much beauty in your words and obviously just really hit me.
Thank you. Yeah, it's and like I said, this is something that I didn't even realize until a few hours ago, that that is the one moment in my life where I am so proud of how I showed up. So, thank you so much. I'm so grateful for the opportunity here to share my story, and thank you so much for holding space and offering advice and insight. I can already tell that you're an amazing coach and so good at what you do.
Thank you. Thank you. And I think that's one of the things that we have to continue to just promote with grief and loss is we just need it to be we need it to be witnessed. Like we don't need to be fixed because we're not broken. And we are literally just having a normal, healthy response to losing the people that mattered the most to us. And just to sit with somebody in presence and just offer your love, like you said, that is going to stick with me forever. That when you have nothing else to offer, your love and presence is more than enough. And I really hope that people really take that in because there's a crisis happening in the grief and loss space with support and people feeling very ill equipped to show up for people in grief and not knowing how to best support them, feeling like they need to have the right words or the right bit of advice or something profound to say. And that's not all what it's about. It's about what you just said. It's just presence and love. And that's more than we could ask for. And so the fact that's what came from this, no mistakes that we were meant to do this together.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. Totally agree with that, Karen.
And it was healing for both of us to do this. Like, I hope you see that too, that I'm also going through a lot right now with just the conversation, and it hit me in a different way than it's hit me before with anyone else. So thank you. for sharing your heart and being vulnerable enough to have this conversation because I just healed another layer by talking to you today in this short amount of time. So thank you.
Absolutely. And thank you so much again for the opportunity. And I hope that our conversation helps someone. And it's amazing to hear that you got another another twinkle of healing today. And I think I did as well. So thank you again.
Thank you all. We'll talk to you soon.